a Space Pro podcast. My name is Bill Wolf. I'm the president and CEO of the Space Force Association, and I'm honored to be joined today with Matt Domo, who is the co-founder of Amazon Web Services and now is running a consulting firm called Fifth Vantage. Matt, thanks so much for being with us today.
Hey, Bill, thank you. Thank you for the opportunity. I'm a big fan of the Space Force and our military and all the things you do and the protections that your team provides. I'm honored to be here.
Well, it's really important work that you've done in the past, and we're going to touch on culture. We're going to touch on artificial intelligence. We're going to touch on, how you really incorporate and what some of the steps are that people need to do to incorporate artificial intelligence into these critical technologies that we know are becoming extremely prevalent, and especially in a domain that you can't see. I mean, you've been working a lot in the cyberspace domain. We at Space Force Association want to ensure we have a strong Space Force to operate in the space domain, and artificial intelligence is going to be a big part of that. Before we get into some of those topics, though, I do want to give you an opportunity to tell our audience a little bit about your background, because the tenacity that you demonstrated to help create AWS was pretty important, and that's going to mean something as we talk about the future workforce that we're going to need. So from your perspective, can you talk a little bit about your journey to helping to create Amazon Web Services and that critical innovation that was developed because of it?
Yeah. Well, thank you, Bill. Yeah, I was raised in Ohio by my dad was chief of police. Came from humble beginnings. He was also a general's bodyguard in the Korean War. And my parents were all about working hard and making sure you you deliver more than people ask, you follow your commitments, and things of that nature. And it was just, drilled into me, which actually became an asset as I move forward because, I've always placed that front and center. So, anyways, I graduated from Ohio State. I'm still an avid Buckeyes fan, and when I yell at the TV, they can hear me. So I went to Microsoft as a developer working on SQL Server, and wound up rising through the ranks and created the enterprise edition of Microsoft SQL Server, the database, which didn't exist before, and then wound up leading 1/3 of the SQL Server development team. But along the way, people thought it couldn't be done. They're like, "Hey, Matt, why are you doing this as a suicide mission? You're gonna fail." And I'm like, it's okay. We'll just go do it, and we did. And then after that, I kind of became the person, Bill and others like, "Hey, there's something over here. He'll go figure it out." So I went over after that and went to work for Satya Nadella, who's now the CEO of Microsoft. He wasn't back then. And we created Microsoft's first SaaS product. It wasn't called SaaS back then, but that's what it was for small businesses. And Satya ran the business side. And I said, "Look, I'll make sure all the trains run. We'll build a great team. If there's something wrong, you'll hear from me first. And I'll tell you the 3 things we're going to go do to make it right." And it worked out. And then after that, Bill wanted voice. Bill Gates. And he said, "Matt, we've got this acquisition, we've got this research team, they've been struggling, go figure it out." And so built a voice product to enable .NET applications to become voice. Back then it was IVR. So it's like push 1 to do this, push 2 to do that. And we did it. It won all kind of awards, most innovative infrastructure product. And it kind of changed the game in that industry. But what it ultimately became was all the server side stuff for Cortana and Windows. And I didn't know that was going to happen, to be honest with you. Then Amazon came calling, and I met with Jeff and Andy Jassy, who's now the COO, who was my boss. And they're like, "Hey, we heard you kind of do this. We're building this thing over here." And it was called AWS. And "Hey, why don't you come check it out?" And so I went there and wound up creating the database division of AWS. It was a combination of a research team, a little off development center, in California, and some internal technology. And again, everybody thought I was crazy. Look, even in Amazon, some funny stories, but executives all over there are like, "Hey, this thing's never gonna fly." Like AWS in general, not just this. You're crazy, and I'm like, "Well, okay, maybe I am a little bit. Well, let's see how it goes." And then SimpleDB, RDS, Redshift followed, and now it powers a large percentage of the internet. And all those people who thought we were crazy, they're now executives in AWS. It's pretty funny. And so yeah, that after that, I stayed with innovation, worked on some virtualization technology as CTO, and we sold it. And then I came down here to Austin, where I live today with my family, and launched the first public cloud on OpenStack. Again, it was kind of floundering and it'll never happen. And in 8 months, we launched to the day I said it would and had great quality. And then I went to another company, and we did IoT for commercial vehicles. Where are you on the map? Everything going on in the cab, your fuel efficiency, safety. It was really one of the largest IoT implementations in the world. And we tracked tens of millions of vehicles all over the planet. And when I walked in, it was crashing every day, and sometimes 6 times a day. 3 years later, we had 4 nines of availability, tripled in size, and Verizon bought us for a bit over $1 billion. Yeah, that's kind of it. And now I'm an author. I write for Newsweek and Fast Company, and I'm a keynote speaker, and I have my little consulting company. And I actually took time off to. I have teenagers that we're starting to enter their teen years, and I'm like, and you and I talked about that, and I'm like, now's the time to have unified parents and a father there, and to kind of have a strong presence. And I kept getting asked by people like, "Hey, can you help us with this technology?" Or, "Hey, can you take a look at this?" And I started to look, and I'm like, I had no intention to doing this. I had no agenda. And I started looking at emerging technologies, and I look back and I'm like, "Hey, we did this. Okay, I have some insight." And I started to look at AI and other things, and I'm kind of like, okay, maybe we should do something about this. And so kind of helping people understand practically and pragmatically what's coming and what they should do about it and why and how. And that's when the magazine's approach. I'd never written. It's me and Grammarly. People don't write this stuff. I write it myself. I do it on LinkedIn, and then I started thinking about, well, hey, I need to build a little team, and I'm like, how can we help as many people as possible? And then I'm like, I kid you not, I'm like, how would the Avengers do it? Like, how could you come in, help people, get them on the path to success, and then move on? And so, I didn't know if I was meant to do this, but it adds value, and I like to help as many people as possible. Like I told you, it changed my life, and now you know why I refer to my team as the Avengers of AI. And so yeah, that's what I'm doing.
Perfect. No, thanks so much for that background. Really do appreciate it. And I think our audience is going to appreciate uh, your contributions to what you've done, obviously standing up AWS, but now the conversation has turned to artificial intelligence and AI. And you've given us keynote to DoD in the past that talks about AI and talks about the criticality of the future of AI. Can you give us a summary of that keynote that you provided to some DoD leaders, and specifically some of the steps that people should be following as they start to interact with artificial intelligence? Because there's this gloom and doom that we'll talk about here in just a moment, but I want to get your perspective on what you've already provided in terms of a narrative to some DoD officials.
Yeah, I did a keynote for the research folks over in San Antonio, and AI was a part of it, but it was really about, I write about, hey, these are the trends that are going to come and what's relevant for you to start off with right now in 2024. and AI, of course, was a key part of it, but there were others as well. And so, what I think the detriment of society when new technology comes up with is you talk about the tech and how. And the first thing you really need to do is let's talk about the what we're trying to do and why. What's the benefit to the DoD? What's the benefit to the Space Force? What's the benefit to your employees, right? They're the unforgotten heroes, right? But, it's all about productivity there and increasing their skills. So, let's talk about what this could look like, how it's going to grow, samples of how it's going to manifest itself and what that's going to look like. And then let's talk about here's 5 pragmatic steps for you to get started with right away for what's relevant to you. Different departments have different goals and visions, but that was the premise.
Thank you. And those 5 steps, are you able to share a summary of what those key steps are? Where do you start? And then what are those consecutive steps from your perspective?
Yeah, I think you really need to, at a high level, like first off is what are you trying to do and why? Like there shouldn't be science projects. You need to experiment quickly, right? And when we started AWS, I call it spiking. Okay, we got a great idea. Let's put, I don't know, 2, 3 people on here and take a few weeks. And let's see what we build. Time boxing, it's really important because it's a forcing function. It forces people to make decisions. And what are we trying to do and why? What are the measurements? How do you know you're heading in the right direction? How do we know it might get an ROI? So you kind of want to have, you definitely want to have some goals and metrics in this first phase to say, okay, this is worth it or not. And if it's not, engineers will do their best because, they want to do great work, but sometimes it's not worth it and you got to move on. So what are you trying to do? Why? Quickly experiment, no science projects, time box it, and have a clear goal and then have a checkpoint. Does this take us along the way of what we're trying to do and why? Does it have a clear ROI? Does it take us along the journey we want to do? And you have a checkpoint. If it does, you move on and invest and go to the next stage. If it doesn't, just stop. And you start to build a chain of innovation that way, right? And I always tell people, venture capitalists aren't the only ones that kind of fund this. Any organization can if you take the portfolio approach. I'm building a portfolio of invested projects, and I'm going to curate them and fund them as they materialize towards the impact to the organization, the people, etc., and manage it that way. And then again, as you keep building, the other thing you don't want to do is boil the ocean. And so you want to come up with, hey, here's the vision of what we're trying to achieve. Here's the strategy. But 70% of transformations fail because people can't communicate the what and why and what's relevant. And the biggest part is they try to eat the elephant whole. Like, let's take it all on right now because engineers, it's cool. They want to work on it and they feel they'll get it. But often as you go along, you learn a lot of things and you have to adjust and you could just get stuck there. So what I tell people is, again, time box it, do a project, get it done in 2 months, get it to MVP. People get nervous at 3 months. So try to do it at 2 months. And let's learn, bite off a small chunk, prove it, and then also build the confidence and excitement in the team. Like, hey, they're going to be nervous. Hey, we can really do this. Here's what I learned. Here's what to do. And as engineers, what they enjoy the most, don't do this because it's going to cause you, problems. And slowly but surely, you start to build excitement, confidence, and therefore confidence to keep moving forward. And then it kind of it snowballs. In Amazon, we called it the flywheel. And as you start delivering like that, then you can expand and do more. So that's really it.
No, that's perfect. And I can't help but hear you consistently talk about team and the importance of team. So, and you talk a lot about culture. And so, from that perspective, how do you curate the team to cover down on the mission that you know needs to get accomplished? And then, how do you keep ensuring that they know that they're taken care of throughout the tenure of the project, but then even beyond? So, can you talk a little bit about the importance of culture and team building?
Absolutely. That's a great question. Look, there's a macro culture. Everybody's got to, have these attributes, but every team has a micro culture too. And of course, they have to dovetail. But I think it's important as a leader, and people also think that you only work with managers. I think that's a bad idea. You work with your managers, you work with your thought leaders, and sometimes the thought leaders are the naysayers, and the architects and people in QA, and you pull them in and say, okay, what culture do we want? What do we value? What do we not value? How do we kind of measure that? How do we kind of curate that? And how do we find people that fit that and make them successful? And how do we get the people, try to do our best up front when we're looking for people that fit that culture to not get in? But then how do we help people who aren't fitting either, change and adapt, or help them move on? And it's really important, from my perspective as a leader, to have that net of the people who run the organization, the managers, the thought leaders, etc. If everybody's bought in and part of it, it becomes infectious. And because you can't be there's not many one man bands on the top hit chart. And if you try to do it yourself, you'll fail. But if you get everybody bought in, and everybody's working off the same scorecard, it goes much better.
That's a great way to put it. Not a lot of one-man bands at the top of the charts, especially today. And so, if, fast forward from AWS and the team that you created there, continuing on with the team you're creating at your current position within your organization, that you continue to iterate and create. What does AI mean for the future? We've heard a lot of discussion about AI and how it's going to change our future workforce, and we're not going to need as many humans doing all the trade labor and skills that we have today, because AI is going to start to take over. What's your perspective on that?
Okay. Ooh, that's a juicy topic. Okay, look, we're at the dawn of the fourth industrial revolution and the birth of the immersive internet. And so we can talk about the immersive thing later. Um, AI is going to, I tell people to focus on the upside and optimize for the upside, and then make sure you do things that protect the downside. I see more upside with AI for humanity, for the workforce, and what we're trying to do than downside. So I take that lens. Look, there's six different types of AI. They move in different ways. They do different things: machine learning, neural nets, generative AI, computer vision, natural language processing, and so forth. But they also complement themselves in different ways. So look, at this first stage, it's all about augmenting humans. If I were to take a step back and apply the 80-20 rule, 20% of the things we do cause 80% of the labor and effort. Do you really want to do that stuff? Or is it, part of the table stakes of getting things done? And here in this first stage, it's about augmenting us. View it as things are being produced as a 24/7 personal assistant, that makes us better, with the goal of handling the tedious and the mundane. Okay, Matt, that sounds great. What does it manifest itself? You and I talked, I use Grammarly when I write my articles. I don't have it write it for me, but I'm not the best typer. It fixes up and helps me point out my problems. Why? It makes it faster for me to produce an article. You're starting to see things in email products. Hey, help me curate my enormous inbox. Tell me what's important. Tell me things I can delay. Oh, by the way, can you kind of give me a draft of what's a great response? And then I'll tune it myself. Again, handle the mundane, handle the tedious with a goal of you focusing on what's important and handling off those things. Why is that important? It allows you to focus on creativity, ingenuity. What's the what are you really trying to do that adds more value both for you as a person, as a worker, but also to the organization, right? And that's where we are at the first stage. It's about augmenting us, not replacing us. And then as you extend that lens further, you start to look at what are the things, working backwards from my employee experience, working backwards for what I'm trying to provide to my customers or the business, in this case, projects for the DoD. What are the ways that we can provide a great experience and being efficient in doing it? And what are the things we should offload from the activities we do to deliver quickly, deliver efficiently, provide that great experience, and re-engineer those? You're going to need it. It isn't going to be things that just get created. Humans have to curate this. Humans have to set up the goals. Humans have to set up the metrics. Humans have to audit it. Humans have to make it sure it's explainable. What does that unlock? Strategy, creativity, thinking about the bigger picture. AI is never going to do that. It's going to provide you insights that you may not have seen, but all of that works into the collective mind about how to do those things, be more creative, be more strategic, etc. Because that's what also adds value for your organization as well as you as a worker, right? I want to focus on the things that make the most impact because at the end of the day, that's what we want to do. Let's double click a little further for people in the trades that are working on trade things. Could we get more automation in the production of circuits, etc.? Sure. Yep, and we will. Um, but can we get more automation to protect the efficiency of the line and understand, predictive, like, hey, things are starting to get askew. We kind of need to step into, smooth out operations and also keep yields high for sure. Um, Welders, are welders going to be replaced? Most often not. I mean, look, when you're welding something, that's a science and an art, right? When you're starting to figure out how to put that together, an AI, for maybe standard basic stuff, sure, but for the big things that are like, hey, I've got to do something, it's creative. It takes thinking through how things are being put together and how I have to customize that to build strength and make sure it's efficient, etc. And AI just it's not going to have that level of thing. And so that's where some of these trades will be there. And let's take it out of the Space Force. I went to my dentist the other day and she's like, hey, we were talking and she's like, I use AI and I thought it was going to replace me. I'm like, what? Yeah, one wouldn't think of a robot drilling on your teeth. And I started asking her, I'm like, how does this work? And she's like, no, it's really great. Like, it can scan the surface of your teeth and do things I can't see in an X-ray and I can't see as a human. And it allows me to focus on what are the most optimal ways I can provide care to you. Like, where should I focus a little more cleaning? Or when I drill to give you a filling, what's the most optimal width and depth or whatever else a dentist does. And she's like, it's not perfect, but it's made me a better dentist. I provide better care to my clients, how does that tie back? My customer, my business. How do I provide the best outcomes? Right? Because at the end of that day, how do I make how do I make the folks that are delivering the project or the care more efficient and focus on what's truly important to optimize for that? And is it replacing the dentist? No, it's augmenting them and making them better. And so, that's where we are. Are some things, the entry level, programmer, we often throw developers at like really basic things because we want them to learn the code base, etc. But is that really the best use of the mind that we just hired them from out of school? Probably not. And so, do we develop the code corpus and our code guidelines and our strategies and automate the base creation of those? Sure, that is going to happen and people are doing it. But what does that do for the people that were hired in? I want to tap into your brain. You learn this new kind of technology in school or where you've worked before. AI is not going to have that. So how do we oversee it and guide it and steer it? Again, remove the tedious, remove the mundane, kind of get that, and leverage the power of creativity and human ingenuity to produce better outcomes. So I realize I gave you a smattering of things, but immersing yourself in how this may manifest is really, really critical because fear is a big thing. If you fear it, you won't move at all. And, a big thing of moving forward with any tech fear or any transition is really trying to think of how is it make it better and move forward. So that's how I'd answer.
Perfect. Thank you. We're living in a society today that has seen transition of technology from the development of the war machine, if you will, in terms of manufacturing and getting products out very quickly, to microwave technology, to cell phone technology, to now the Internet of Things, as you've mentioned. So how does this society, you've got two components here. You've got the next generation that's moving up, and you have folks that have been around a while. So how do these folks who have been around a while kind of get out of the way for these young kids coming up who can look at these new emerging technologies and start to define a better, more prosperous planet for us?
Hey, that's a great question. I'll delve into, I faced this, you talked about when we created the database, when I created the database division, and yeah, we had some friction. And I'll distill it down to I had two techies and the CFNO that were some of the barriers to moving forward, but that categorizes leadership and the people actually building things. And so look, the techies were the systems engineer and the database administrator. And so I'll enter this with this analogy. In the fast moving river of business and change, people clutch onto the driftwood of control to navigate it, right? I own that. I control that. Well, let's dig in. Do you really want to do that? So the system administrator, hey, where do you spend all your time? I patch, I run network cables, I stack gear, I pull it all together. What do you really want to go spend, 15 hours a day go and do that when it shows up? Or, what do you really want to do? Well, hey, I don't have time to do that, but I'd really like to take a step back and, design a great network and, maybe put some strategies in place to make us more efficient. I'm always under this pressure to get it done, so I make shortcuts and, the surgical cut, but I never really get the time to go back and, hey, what's the right way to do it? I'm like, okay, so if we handled all that for you, would that enable you to focus on what you really want to do and where it adds more value to the organization? And that spawned some conversations. And by the way, we want to learn from you. I certainly don't know everything you do. Why don't you help us figure it out? We did the same thing with database administrators. Hey, Matt, I own that. We tune it. I have to set up disks and RAID and, what's the right striping and how I network that and how I tune the database. Okay, great. Do you really want to do all that? What do you really want to do? Well, hey, I'd really like to work with the developers to optimize their queries and indexes and help them structure, the right stored procedures and, help them optimize the way things operate. But I'm always stuck with this reactive thing, because I don't get a chance to talk to them up front. And, now we got to keep it running because it's in production. Okay, what happens if we handled a lot of that? You can help us figure out what's the line, but what happens if we handled the things that are tedious, mundane, eats all their time, and helps you focus on the things that add creative value, really move the needle towards delivering value to your business and clients? Help us understand that. And over time, that happened. Now let's talk about the CFO. I always say that, in many organizations, the CFO is really a critical part of business because they ultimately decide what gets funded and where the money gets spent. And so started to deal with that. And, they're a senior person. And for 20 years, they had been used to, I've got to control expenses. I have to have predictability. I have to smooth the curve, right? I need it steady because it makes it easier for me to answer to the board, the executive team, or customers. Okay, great. Well, you have to buy well ahead of demand. So you're spending millions of dollars and you're telling me only 20% sometimes of the actual equipment gets used. And now I'm stuck with it because you're going to amortize it for 5 years, month over month, to smooth out that curve. But you're really spending excess millions that the business doesn't need. What happens if you could pay as you go, tune it? You have to be hands on, watch it. But you could raise up and down and not carry that excess work, which also drives manpower. What happens if we did that? Well, that's OpEx. And typically OpEx was people. And, now fast forward, 10 years, everything's OpEx. And, the two techies, we still have system administrators and database administrators running hardware and data centers. But curiously enough, the people that get under the most demand and get the most dollars are the folks that are working on the cloud things because creativity, ingenuity, and things of that nature. So, did some things get replaced? Somewhat. Did we focus on more optimal things for the business that both the employee and the business valued? Yes. Did we change the way we operate business to become more effective, more productive, better monetary results? Yes. So are we going to see that same analogy with AI? Yes. Does that help?
It sure does, and it really gets after how we have to focus on those things that we should be focusing on versus spending time focusing on those things that we used to focus on, but we don't need to now because of artificial intelligence. I think that's the biggest critical role, is trying to figure out how can we fit this into our current structure. So speaking of kind of steering it back towards the DoD, one of the biggest things we have, one of the biggest challenges is data and getting access to relevant data very quickly. Space domain awareness and knowing where things are in space is an important one because you can't visualize it. You don't have eyeballs on it. You need sensors to give you data, and those sensors are, a lot of sensors providing a lot of data. So how do we get access to that data? From your perspective, how can we utilize artificial intelligence to get access to that data?
That's a great challenge, and something that's fast moving, maybe faster than humans can react, and it's unpredictable. And um, great. Where does AI step in? It can process enormous amount of data very, very quickly. And by the way, it can recognize patterns right away that aren't intuitive at first blush. Great, this satellite, this meteor, I haven't been in space myself, so I'm conjecturing. But these things are moving around up there, and some of it's unpredictable and happens really quickly, right? It's moving over 10,000 miles an hour. Can a human really map that and keep track of all that? Most likely not, right? So as good as the Space Force and our astronauts are, I'm sure there's some really hairy stuff. And so, great. What are we trying to measure? What are the inputs that we have to optimize for to make sure we have safe and efficient outcomes? Map it out there. Then go into the data. How should the data, if you have that, if you have that capability, if you're building something new, you can get better at that. But if the data's already there, that's the challenge. One of the biggest impediments with AI right now, it's the data. How do I structure it? I'll use the analogy of first name. Is it F name? Is it first hyphen name? Is it case sensitive? Is some of it 20 characters? Is some of it 15 characters? Like, what do I really need? And how do I curate that? That's one of the biggest. And how do I get access to it? How do I get it in a way that I can truly get the what? What are the insights I need? And how do I structure it to produce the outcomes I'm looking for? On a greenfield, easier. On where I'm at now, or if I have all these systems, you really want to kind of map out. Now, back to the analogy that we talked about at the beginning. I'm going to have a grandiose vision of what I'm going to try to do, but I'd fail or it'd be really hard if I tried to eat the elephant whole. So maybe we pick out a project that under this condition, I'm spitballing here because again, I'm not an astronaut, but as I'm navigating, what's the data I need to do to optimize those little incremental things I need to do to keep the rocket moving forward? And how do I get that data efficiently, scalably, rapidly to the controls to handle that while my pilots are focusing on the macro health of the mission and the things going on in the rocket and the areas around it to augment me? How do I get that creativity and ingenuity? So start with something small, but adds value. Get it moving really quickly. Learn. Hey, we did this, but now we need things in different format. I do that in 2 months. Keep it time boxed. I know I'm on the right track because I developed, I don't know, these 5 criteria and go forward. Do you see that picture I painted there?
I sure do. Yes. Thank you so much. And then the final question is, it's got to come down to trust. So when we started looking at AI and what AI can do, how do we trust certain AI architectures, if you will?
Okay. That's also a multi-part question. Okay. So first off, you have to define what trust is. What do you as the organization need to know to ensure it's doing the things that it was intended to do? And so one way is to make it explainable. That's the big trend right now, explainable AI. I need to understand how it's built and understand what it's doing, why, and how. It should be human readable. It should be human audible. I should know what the intended outcomes are, both positively and negatively. So I know if it's making the wrong decisions. How do I do that? I audit it. I am looking, I being an engineer in your team or team of engineers, I'm looking at what this does and is it developing the outcomes that we need? If you start to see things not, or it's not getting better and better and better and zeroing into 99.9% of the time getting it right, what does that do? I unlock human creativity and ingenuity to dive in and see what we need to do to make it better. It could be in the data up front. It could be in how it's sent. It could be in the algorithm. It could be in the output. But again, the humans are going to need to do that. And then you have to look at the security side too. Remember, I'm not saying we're having terminators or robots or any of that. I'm talking about how do I secure it and make sure you all know better than me. We have nefarious actors. We always talk about that. But did you know that the biggest, oh, hang on, the biggest error in security is human problems. Humans make mistakes. None of us are perfect. And the vulnerabilities and things that we create are because we made a mistake the majority of the time. So how do we know that quickly? How do we audit that? How do we protect it to limit the blast radius, if you will, if someone makes a mistake? Maybe you create some bots that are constantly scanning your network looking for the things you need to protect for, plus maybe the OWASP top 25, which has the latest vulnerabilities. What am I trying to do? Mean time to discovery. How do I know if I have my policy right, my architecture right? How do I know I'm bouncing off the guardrails as I'm navigating that fast moving river and take action as quickly as possible? That's how I think that's how I think it should go.
Sir, thanks so much, Matt. I really appreciate you taking time today to discuss everything you've done in the past, but also what you're working on in the future, and then the criticality of artificial intelligence and where that's going today on a Space Pro podcast. So thanks again for your time today, sir, and I look forward to speaking with you in the future as this conversation continues to evolve.
It's been my pleasure. Thank you, Bill. And like I said, all of us as kids, especially as young adults, we all dreamed about going into space. You guys are doing it. It's awesome. And you have super creativity and problems that the vast majority of human beings never experience. And that's amazing. And what a great opportunity to go work on the furthering society and things of that nature, and going where people have never gone before. So like, I want to leave you with that. I'm a huge fan of what you're trying to do. It's always been there. So keep on keeping on.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Matt. We'll talk to you soon.
Thank you.